All right, so we are one sleep away. You got Dolphins Bills Saturday night. I mean, finally, let's go. Come on now. It feels like for the third straight week, we have a very big game, and we're going to find out. We're going to learn if this is the same old Dolphins. All right. And joining us here on the Johnny Cuba guest line is MJ Acosta-Ruiz, who everyone down here knows, of course, local celebrity out there hosting NFL Total Access every single night on the NFL Network. Thanks a lot for joining us here, MJ. How are you? You doing okay over there on the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's always good to talk to you, Zaz, and of course to connect with everybody back home, especially this time of year. I'm missing Miami a little extra. But yeah, we're doing good, just plugging away at the season.
I want to. We'll talk plenty about the Dolphins. You're a huge Dolphin fan, and obviously you got connections to the team. But first, I want to know what is your day like? NFL Total Access. I mean, how do we prepare? It's on every night, 7 p.m. I believe. What's the daytime like? How do we prepare for the show?
It's chaos. It really does vary every single day. We usually start around like 8 or 9 in the morning.
Wow,
so
that's
it's on at 4 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah.
So we're starting closer to like 11 a.m. noonish Miami time. But yeah, it is a pretty long day. So we have production meetings to make sure all the guys are okay with the topics that we're thinking about for the show. But even after that meeting, those change like 3 or 4 times, depending on the news of the day, press conferences from the team. So we're sort of following all of the NFL activity throughout the day. And that really shapes what we talk about on the show. And then there's pre-tapes, there's feature stories, there's feature interviews that we do all the way leading up until we go live at 7 p.m. Eastern. So it varies. It varies greatly each day, which is awesome. It keeps me on my toes for sure, but it's a hectic day.
Is there a recent example where, okay, so you're going on at 4 p.m. local time. Is there a recent example, maybe the last couple of years, where it's like 3 p.m. local or 3:30 p.m. local, and holy shit, something huge just happened, and now we got to rip up everything we planned for, and it's just chaos?
I remember vividly earlier this year, sometime in the offseason, when Davante Adams got traded from the Packers to the Raiders. We were in the middle of the show when this happened. And James Jones was on the show that day, and he and Davante Adams are very good friends. So we're in the middle of a commercial break, like, okay, throw out the rest of the rundown. This is what we're going with. And Davante is FaceTiming James Jones, who's sitting right across from me. I was like, you answer that phone right now. Answer it immediately. We had David Carr as well, of course, a quarterback for the Raiders. His brother FaceTimes him in the middle of the show. So that is probably one of the most memorable shows we've had. It was one of my favorite shows because you throw everything out. And that's the fun of it, right? You just never know what could happen. Yesterday, we had a Roger Goodell press conference. So we're like, okay, is he going to speak as we start the show? Is he going to be done before we go on air? So there are always these moments that can sort of reframe the entire show. And that's sort of what I live for, to be honest.
You were at the Dolphin game this past weekend, right? Was it cold enough for them to have heaters on the sidelines?
So Joy Taylor and I were at this game, canoodled side by side because we were freezing.
Really?
Freezing cold. It was so cold, not compared to what it will be in Buffalo, obviously, but as a South Florida girl, it was cold, man. Listen, people were out there with scarves, gloves, multiple layers, puff coats. We saw quite a few puff coats. And sure, is what cold means different in Los Angeles? Absolutely. But I don't think anybody would argue that anything below 40 is a little cold. Yeah.
It's very cold.
Maybe not if you live in Minnesota, but if you're in Los Angeles or if you're in Miami, that is objectively cold. So the stadium is also not covered. There is a covering on top, but it is open all the way around. So you got like these wind gusts. It was cold, y'all. Listen, and if you're on the turf, it's different too. So I don't blame them for it. I was like, can I borrow one of the heat lamps? Because your girl is freezing right now.
Now, so you're a South Florida girl. Do you have have you ever been at a game with the weather? Like tomorrow night, Dolphins in Buffalo. I've never been in the stands for a snow game. I can't imagine that. Have you ever been at a game as a fan in the elements?
I have. So Christmas Eve 2016, this is when I had left South Florida, moved to San Diego. I was covering the Chargers very heavily when they were still in San Diego, and they played the Cleveland Browns on Christmas Eve. Oh my God. How and why do people choose to sit here in these stands? Like, y'all cold weather fans are just built different. I'm not going. Unless it's a covered suite of some kind. Like, I'm gonna watch it at home in warmth with a blanket on. It's insanity. But people, tough. You see them?
Yep.
They're out. The respect to those fans, because I could never. I'm not built for that.
Has Joy told you? I told this story on the show yesterday that she was with me. We attended the coldest game that either of us have ever attended, where I dragged her. I think it was 2012. I think it was 10 years ago, where I dragged her when we were in New York for the Super Bowl. I dragged her to the Stadium Series Winter Classic at Yankee Stadium, Rangers, Islanders, the outdoor winter game. I kid you not, MJ. I think it was 5 degrees. And
I can't believe she's still your friend after that.
Oh, anytime I bring it up, she gets so mad whenever I bring it up.
That's insanity. I can't believe she agreed to it, actually, to begin with. Absolutely not.
Her beer, swear to God, her beer, she put it down in the cup holder, and within 5 minutes, it was frozen.
Of course it was. It's 5 degrees. I was at the Super Bowl in Minnesota. Again, why do we do this? Why do we do this to ourselves? Now, to remember, all of the Super Bowl activities leading up the week of were outdoors, because the stadium, of course, in Minnesota is now enclosed. Thank the Lord. But everything else you had to be outside for. The Minnesota folks are very proud of how tolerant they are of the cold. It's uninhabitable.
I agree with you. It's weird though with the cold. I don't remember now. Maybe it's because the Dolphins are really good this year and there's super high expectations going into the game Saturday nights. But this isn't the first year that the Dolphins are playing in cold weather. Matter of fact, they do it every year. And they usually do it 2 or 3 times a year, depending on when the Buffalo, New England, New York games are scheduled. I feel like it's all we're talking about this week is how are the Dolphins playing in the weather, as if they don't do this every year.
Thank you, Zaz. I was like, this isn't a foreign concept to them. Of course, they're not in it every single week, but it's not like they are not. And also, you have guys who came in who are on the team who come from all over the league, all over these teams. So this isn't like something where you've plucked somebody from Hawaii and throw them in Antarctica and they've never been there before. Like, it's gonna be fine. And I'm sorry, who is mad at the heat lamps? If I'm in charge of the team, I want to give them everything they can. Do you remember the opposite of this in week 3 when the Bills were in Miami and they were parched, dehydrated, Josh Allen, red cheeks? I was concerned for him. It was 120 degrees on the field. I was there for that game. Why wouldn't you want to give your team every advantage? I think that's chess, not checkers, but that's just me.
This is a monster game this weekend, MJ. We really are going to find out. And all the trepidation that the Dolphins fan has had, leading up to this game, all the nerves, loss of San Francisco, the game of the Chargers was a disaster. That all goes away if the Dolphins win this game Saturday night.
100%. A win cures all. Especially at the back end of the season. I think they have one of the tougher schedules. New England always plays them very, very tough. The Jets are not to be dismissed this season. The Packers, for some reason, even though they have not been great, they've been a huge disappointment this year. It's just not a team that you can overlook, right? And then, of course, Buffalo, which is the first one that starts on Saturday. So there's a lot on the line, not just in the division, in terms of the playoff seeding, in terms of the playoff race. There's a lot to be said. Also, to remind everybody that this wasn't a fluke, that this team is very talented, that Mike McDaniel is for real. I'm gonna need Mike to pull it together, especially for this game. Because I remember if you just saw the television spots ahead of that San Francisco game, all of the love that they were giving Mike, respectfully so, and this team, we need to get back to that. Because at this point, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess it wasn't real.
ZASLOW Show 2.0 poll question a couple days ago. I was asking, who is there more pressure on this Saturday night, Tua or Mike McDaniel? What do you think?
I think it is Tua. Because at the end of the day, he's the face. He's the QB. He's the most important position on the field. And he had so much criticism leading up to this season. And we finally saw him playing at the potential we knew that he had. And quite honestly, especially against the Chargers, against the 49ers and the 49ers top ranked total defense in the league, you almost get a mulligan. If you had the yips that game, it's understandable as a QB, right? But against this Chargers team, and it's not discounting the Chargers, but that was supposed to be their get right game. and he did not. It was bad. That was a bad game for Tua. So I think it is on him. I think it is more on his shoulders, more so than Mike's.
There were a lot of Dolphin fans that game last weekend, right? Like at the beginning of the game. Yeah, it was. I was based on the sound early in the game. It may have been close to 50-50. Am I right about that?
I would even wager to say maybe 60-40. I mean, because we were walking through the crowd and I was so pleasantly surprised. I mean, we started the Miami Dolphins touchdown song at one point. Everybody jumped in. Even as we were leaving the stadium, I mean, you could just see teal everywhere. It was awesome. It was awesome to see. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were out here in LA like this. I think a lot of people may have flown in as well, but not, tens of thousands of people flying in. It was mostly Dolphins fans, I have to say.
How cool is it now where I would imagine for your first time since being out there, on the West Coast, NFL Network, again, every night, NFL Total Access. You guys talk about the Dolphins on a daily basis. And I mean, that's never been the case for you out there.
No, this is the first season, and this is my 5th season with the NFL Network now, where they are part of, at minimum, the meeting.
The daily rundown every day.
Every day. And the great thing is, now that I'm hosting instead of reporting, I can be a homer all I want, which is fantastic. We sort of lean into it on the show. But I can also go hard for my team. I mean, it's no secret. Everybody knows my fandom for the Dolphins, my connections to the Dolphins. But it's been cool to not only be talking about them, but to see them doing well this year and to know that we're still in this thing and we can definitely turn it around.
MJ used to be a cheerleader for the Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think to yourself how much easier it would have been to be cheering on the sidelines with the canopy as opposed to those years before they did all the renovations? MJ, those are some hot Sunday 1 p.m. games for you, I'm sure.
I don't think the canopy makes a difference, to be honest with you. I still talk to the girls now. No, it doesn't. If it rains, you're still getting soaked. If it's hot, you're still drenched in sweat.
And they don't let you put your hair up, right? It's extra hot, right?
No. Yes. You learn. So training camp for the cheerleaders starts right after auditions in April. And you are at practice, hair down, full makeup. It's not to torture the girls. This is literally training for game days. If you can't do it inside the practice bubble and keep it together, how are you going to do it on a game day when it's 120 degrees?
And how about for games where it's a torrential downpour?
You lean in. The makeup, you get a different level of makeup. It's called prolong wear. This is like theater level makeup where rain, sweat, it doesn't move. You see them, they're flawless the whole game, 4 quarters. They look amazing. So there's so much that goes into it. We could do a whole other podcast on that.
I told this story a couple of weeks ago when the Dolphins were in the midst of their 5-game win streak, where for the first time in my life, not that it's the first time in my life I've ever experienced the Dolphins be really good. I'm 41 years old. Every year in the late 80s and the 90s, Marino, I thought they were winning the Super Bowl every single year. I've experienced really good Dolphins teams. But for the first time in my life, I sent my friend a text message a few weeks ago. And the text message was with a question mark at the end. And I said, Dolphins winning the Super Bowl? And so that was the first time I've ever texted that to anyone, because we only text messaging only became a thing in maybe 02, 03.
Something like that.
And the Dolphins haven't been a Super Bowl contender in that time period. So literally the first time in my life, I sent a text message asking if the Dolphins are going to win the Super Bowl. Have you had moments this year as a huge Dolphin fan where you actually thought to yourself, holy crap, are we good enough to be that this year?
Yeah, I think going into the bye week, I was like, okay, we're almost at the halfway point. This is serious. This is a real possibility for us. But I think, Saz, you know as well as I do, being a lifelong Dolphins fan, that you have to be cautiously optimistic. So I sort of stop myself when I start getting these lucid dreams about going to the Super Bowl and wearing my Marino jersey and, all that stuff. I know I think it's a defense mechanism. I'm trying to protect myself, but I am very, very hopeful.
What tell everyone everything you got going on. Of course, like I said, 7 p.m. Weeknights, NFL Total Access. What else you got going on, MJ?
I also co-host the El Huddle podcast for the NFL. So it's sort of not a different take, but it is 2 Latinos, myself and Will Selva, who you guys might know from Good Morning Football. We host this podcast every week. And we just infuse a little bit more of the culture, infuse a little bit more of the Latino perspective into the game that we love. But we also just get to exist as two Latinos who love the sport. And I think that's really resonated with a lot of our football fandom here in the US, which has been really cool. So that drops every Thursday, anywhere you get your podcasts.
What are we watching these days? What series are we watching when we have some free time? What are we watching? I'm always looking for suggestions. What are you watching?
I of course just finished White Lotus.
I just asked the other day on Twitter, do I need to be watching White Lotus?
Let me preface it by saying this. It is a lot. It is a lot.
I have no idea what it's about.
It's freaking wild. I don't think we actually know what the premise is, but there's a lot of shit that goes down on that show. It's crazy. It's weird. It's a little disturbing. I think when I started watching the show, I was like, I'm going to give it a few episodes because I'm just curious as to where this is going. And it's been the same thing for season 2 as well. So I recommend it, but you got to just understand that if you're not all in after the first episode, give it a beat. Dead to Me is really good. I've been
the new season just came out of Dead to Me, right?
I finished it yesterday in tears.
We love that. We love that.
It was great.
Did they end it because she's sick, Christina Applegate? Is the show over after season 3?
It does seem. I think this is the final season, but the way it ended does leave a little bit of a question mark. Like you could potentially, but they put a good bow on it, even if they don't come back for another.
And I'll tell you, MJ, this Wednesday, I haven't loved a show this much in years.
Obsessed.
I love that
Can't
show.
get enough.
My boys and I, we banged through it in 2 days a couple weeks ago. I love that show so much, MJ.
They did it perfectly. I don't know how all of us resonate so closely with Wednesday Addams. Jenna Ortega, who's the actress on the show, is brilliant in that scheme. And I think just the dynamics of the show, we can all relate at some point to being a little dark. I loved it. It was so well done. I'm upset it was only 8 episodes. Like what happened to the years of 13, 15, 20 episode seasons? Give us that.
Yeah.
Give us that, please.
MJ, excellent job. Again, make sure you check out the podcast every Thursday and NFL Total Access, of course, every night as MJ hosts and representing all the Dolphin fans out there.
I got y'all.
Thanks a lot, MJ. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Zaz. You're the best.